A Lemnorian ambassador screams in agony as a massive Tibetan mastiff rips out his throat, silencing his mocking laughter forever. Just moments before, Ambassador Murloc had been sneering at humanity's primitive culture on a news broadcast, especially ridiculing their bond with simple-minded pets. He declared that the Lemnorians only spared Earth from conquest because humans were too backward to be worth dominating. Lewis Thompson, a hardened ex-Marine, watched the broadcast in a dingy colony bar. As he drained his whiskey, anger simmered in his gut. He whistled for his loyal war dog Maximus, who padded over from the corner. The huge mastiff's muscles rippled under his thick fur, still scarred from many battles against humanity's foes on distant worlds. Louis scratched Maximus behind the ears, remembering all the times the dog had saved his life in combat, ripping out alien throats, shielding him from scorching weapon blasts, never flinching from danger. "They've got no clue who they're fucking with," Louis muttered. He stood, Maximus rising to his side. They strode out into the night, a man and beast forged in war, ready to show the arrogant aliens the true ferocity of Earth's overlooked defenders. Louis's boots stomped down the concrete corridor of the top-secret military base. Maximus's paws thudded alongside him, the massive mastiff's muscles rippling under his fur. The lights overhead cast harsh shadows across the ex-Marine's chiseled features, his jaw set with resolve. They pushed through double doors into a cavernous briefing room. A semicircle of uniformed officers, all hardened veterans of humanity's wars on distant worlds, looked up as Louis took his place at the table. At the head loomed General Winters, his steel-grey hair cropped short, his eyes flinty under a craggy brow. "As you've all heard, those Lemnorian bastards are mounting a full-scale invasion," Winters growled, his gravelly voice echoing off the cement walls. "A whole damn armada to bomb us back to the Stone Age and strip our planet bare." Louis's fists clenched, knuckles whitening. Maximus let out a low, rumbling growl. "But this is what you've trained for," Winters continued, gaze sweeping the room. "Why we made you more than human. Why we forged unbreakable bonds between you and your animal partners." Louis glanced around at his fellow soldiers, each sitting ramrod straight next to their battle-scarred companions. Lions, bears, raptors, even a giant eagle, its piercing eyes scanning the room. He looked down at Maximus, seeing his own determination reflected in the dog's dark gaze. Winters stood, placing his fists on the table. "You're Earth's last line of defense, our only hope. It's up to you to meet those alien fucks head-on and send them crying back to the stars." His voice dropped to a snarl. "Whatever it takes, you stop them. Rip them to shreds. Failure is not a fucking option." As the general's words rang out, a palpable tension seized the room, the air all but crackling with barely restrained ferocity. Louis met Maximus's eyes, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "Dismissed," Winters barked. "Fuck 'em up good." The screech of chairs against concrete tore through the air as the human-animal teams surged to their feet. Louis and Maximus moved as one back out into the corridor, footsteps echoing like war drums, ready to paint the stars red with Lemnorian blood. This time the aliens would learn the true meaning of humanity's reckoning had come. Louis braced as the underground base shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling, as the Lemnorians' orbital bombardment hammered the surface. Emergency lights flickered, bathing the cavernous staging bay in a hellish red glow. All around him, the human-animal strike teams hurried to their ships, a motley assortment of battered but brutal assault craft. "This is it, boy," Louis said, checking the charge on his pulse rifle as Maximus growled at his side. "Time to show these alien fucks what it means to be human." The bay doors ground open with the screech of straining metal, revealing a scene of utter devastation. The once gleaming skyscrapers of New York City stood in ruins, flames licking at their shattered facades. Smoke choked the sky, turning the sun a bloody crimson. And swarming through the rubble came the Lemnorians, their insectoid bodies encased in gleaming black armor, their compound eyes glittering with malice. They scuttled forward on spindly legs, plasma rifles clutched in their clawed hands, mandibles clicking in anticipation of slaughter. Louis and Maximus charged, a roar tearing from the marine's throat, a howl of primal fury from his canine companion. Behind them surged the rest of the strike team, each human warrior flanked by their animal partner, lions, tigers, bears, all enhanced by human science into the ultimate killing machines. They crashed into the Lemnorian lines like a tidal wave of fangs and fury. Maximus leapt, his powerful jaws clamping down on a Lemnorian soldier's head, wrenching it clean off in a spray of ichor. To their left, Ursa the Kodiak bear rose onto her hind legs, towering over the aliens, and brought her paw crashing down like a wrecking ball. Chitin crunched. Lemnorian screams cut short as the bear tore into their ranks. Sergeant Vasquez was at Ursa's side, her face a mask of determination as she raked the aliens with covering fire from her pulse rifle. Each shot burned through Lemnorian armor like paper, sending smoking corpses tumbling to the rubble-strewn ground. In the thick of the chaos, Private Singh and Raj wove a deadly dance, the tiger's claws hamstringing Lemnorian troops, leaving them helpless before Singh's pinpoint shots. One alien managed to swing its rifle towards the private, but Raj was faster. The tiger's jaws closed around the Lemnorian's arm, biting down to the bone. Singh put a pulse bolt through the creature's head a heartbeat later. Overhead, Lieutenant Hawkins and Zephyr dueled with the Lemnorian dropships, the eagle's razor-sharp talons carving great rents in their hulls. Hawkins whooped in savage joy as her bird brought one of the craft spiraling down in flames to crash among its own troops. The battle raged, the air thick with the ozone tang of pulse fire and the coppery stench of blood, both red and Lemnorian green. Louis lost himself in the rhythm of war, Maximus a constant presence at his side, an extension of his own will. They fought as one being, one purpose, to defend their home, their planet, their species. Yet for every Lemnorian that fell, another seemed to take its place, an unending tide of chitin and hate. Louis's muscles burned, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But he pushed on, Maximus never flagging at his side. They couldn't stop, couldn't rest. The survival of everything they held dear depended on them, on this desperate, bloody stand amid the ruins of humanity's greatest city. So they fought and bled and killed human and animal alike, united in a bond more powerful than anything the Lemnorians could comprehend. Slowly, inch by blood-soaked inch, they began to push the aliens back, the superior Lemnorian technology faltering before the humans' indomitable spirit and the ferocious loyalty of their animal companions. But the cost was high. Louis saw Sergeant Vasquez go down, a plasma bolt burning through her chest, even as Ursa, roaring in bestial rage, threw herself at the Lemnorian responsible. Private Singh staggered, Raj limping at his side, the tiger's fur matted with the blood leaking from a dozen wounds. And still the Lemnorians came. High above the ravaged streets of New York, Ambassador Murlock slammed his armored fist down on the command console, the metal denting under the force of the blow. His compound eyes blazed with fury as he watched the video feeds from the planet's surface, where his soldiers were being torn apart by Earth's beasts. "Enough of this," he snarled, mandibles clicking in rage. He turned to his subordinates, who cowered under his wrathful gaze. "Unleash the juggernauts. Let's see how these humans fare against our ultimate creations." In the drop bays of the Lemnorian ship, massive forms stirred. The juggernauts, each as large as a terrestrial building, uncurled their segmented limbs. Hideous fusions of insect and reptile, their hides gleamed like polished obsidian, impervious to all but the heaviest weapons. Claws the size of cars flexed, eager to rend and tear. With a series of earth-shaking thuds, the juggernauts were released from orbit, plummeting towards the battle-scarred city below. Louis fired his pulse rifle into the face of a charging Lemnorian soldier, the alien's head exploding in a spray of green ichor. Beside him, Maximus crushed another's torso in his powerful jaws, shaking the corpse like a rag doll before tossing it aside. His words were cut off as a tremendous impact shook the ground, sending both man and dog stumbling. Louis looked up, his blood running cold at the sight that greeted him. A monstrosity towered over the battlefield, its body a nightmarish melding of chitinous armor and scaly hide. It let out a roar that made the very air tremble, windows shattering for miles around. Lewis had no answer. He raised his rifle and fired, the pulse bolt sparking harmlessly off the creature's hide. Maximus, ever fearless, charged the juggernaut with a snarl. He leapt at the beast, aiming for its throat, but a massive claw swatted him out of the air like an insect. The dog slammed into a ruined wall with a yelp of pain, sliding to the ground in a heap. "Max!" Louis screamed, running to his fallen companion. He crouched by the mastiff's side, feeling for injuries. Maximus whimpered, his ribs clearly broken, but he struggled to stand, still ready to fight. All around them, more impacts shook the earth as additional juggernauts landed, each as horrific and huge as the first. The human-animal teams, so recently on the verge of victory, now scrambled desperately to regroup in the face of this new threat. Overhead, Zephyr dove towards one of the juggernauts, Hawkins guiding her eagle partner in a strafing run. But before the bird could strike, a Lemnorian fighter screamed out of the smoke-choked sky, cannons blazing. Rounds tore through Zephyr's wings, and she spiraled out of control, Hawkins' screams echoing over the comms as her ship plummeted earthward. Louis looked from Maximus to the rampaging juggernauts and back, despair a leaden weight in his gut. They had come so far, fought so hard, but in the face of these new horrors, it seemed all their efforts had been for naught. The tide of battle had turned once more, and this time there seemed no way to turn it back. Louis gritted his teeth as he surveyed the carnage, the juggernauts rampaging through the ruins of New York unchecked. Maximus lay limp in his arms, the mastiff's breathing shallow, his fur matted with blood. The human-animal teams disengaged from the monsters, fighting a desperate rearguard action as they retreated. Ursa limped heavily, Sergeant Vasquez supporting her massive frame. Raj dragged himself along on 3 legs, the 4th hanging useless and bloody. High above, Zephyr spiraled down to earth, one wing bent at an unnatural angle, Lieutenant Hawkins barely conscious in her cockpit. Louis charged through the shattered streets, cradling Maximus close to his chest. His boots pounded on the cracked pavement, his heart hammering in his ears. He could feel the heat of the juggernaut's breath on his back, could hear their earth-shaking steps as they pursued. At last, the reinforced doors of the underground bunker came into view. Louis shouldered them open, staggering inside. The other teams followed close behind, dragging their wounded animal partners. "Patel!" Louis bellowed, laying Maximus gently on an examination table. "We need you." "My God," she breathed. "What happened?" "Lemnorians dropped some kind of super monsters on us," Louis panted. "Tore through us like we were nothing." Patel was already moving, her hands flying over Maximus's broken body, assessing the damage. She moved from animal to animal, triaging their injuries, barking orders to her assistants. Louis gripped the edge of the examination table, his knuckles white. "Tell me you can save them, Doc." Patel paused, meeting Louis's desperate gaze. "There might be a way," she said slowly. "I've been working on a new serum, a next-gen enhancement. It could boost their strength, their healing, to levels we've never seen." "Then what are you waiting for?" Louis demanded. "Use it." "It's untested," Patel warned. "Risky. I can't guarantee—" "Does it look like we have a choice?" Louis snapped, gesturing to the broken forms of the animals around them. "Those things out there will kill us all. We need our partners back in the fight." Patel hesitated a moment longer, then nodded. She turned to her assistants. "Prep the serum, we're doing this." She filled a syringe with a glowing blue liquid from a secure fridge, then approached Maximus. The dog lay still, his breathing ragged. Patel placed a comforting hand on his flank, then slid the needle into his skin, depressing the plunger. For a moment nothing happened. Then Maximus's eyes snapped open, glowing an eerie blue. He surged to his feet, his wounds visibly knitting closed, his muscles bulging with newfound strength. Patel moved to the other animals, administering the serum to each in turn. One by one they rose, their eyes blazing with the same otherworldly light. Ursa shook her massive head, her broken bones resetting with audible cracks. Raj flexed his claws, his mangled legs straightening, flesh and fur regrowing over exposed bone. Zephyr spread her wings, the bent pinions snapping back into place. Louis knelt in front of Maximus, looking into his loyal companion's transformed eyes. He saw no trace of pain or fear, only a fierce, primal readiness. "What do you say, boy?" Louis whispered. "Ready for round 2? Maximus let out a bark that shook the very walls of the bunker, a sound that was more raw than canine vocalization. All around the room, the other enhanced animals added their voices to the call, a rising, savage chorus. Louis stood, unslinging his pulse rifle. He met the gazes of the other human soldiers, seeing his own grim determination reflected back at him. "Let's show these alien bastards what it means to fuck with Earth," he growled. As one, the human-animal teams surged towards the bunker's exit, ready to rejoin the battle. The doors groaned open, the smoke and screams of the war-torn city pouring in. Louis and Maximus led the charge, the enhanced Mastiff bounding ahead with impossible speed and grace. They emerged into the hellscape of the ravaged street, the juggernauts turning ponderously to face them. One of the monsters lumbered forward, its claws gouging craters in the asphalt. It loosed a challenging bellow, but Maximus met its roar with one of his own. The Mastiff gathered himself and leapt, soaring over the juggernaut's slashing talons to crash into its hideous face. Maximus's jaws clamped down on the beast's armored hide, his enhanced strength driving his fangs deep. He wrenched his head back and with a sickening crack tore a plate of chitin free. The juggernaut screamed, ichor gushing from the wound. It thrashed, trying to dislodge the snarling dog, but Maximus held fast. His claws found gaps in the creature's armor, ripping and tearing. All around, the other enhanced animals joined the fray. Ursa barreled into a juggernaut, her claws shearing through its limbs. Raj pounced on another, his fangs finding its throat. Zephyr swooped and dove, her talons and beak ripping at the monster's eyes. The human soldiers added their fire to the melee, their pulse rifles searing holes in the juggernaut's hides, where their animal partners had torn the armor away. The beasts began to fall, their titanic corpses crashing to the ground. High above, Louis caught a glimpse of movement, a Lemnorian dropship trying to flee. He whistled sharply, pointing. Maximus disengaged from the juggernaut he had killed, his muzzle dripping with ichor. He bounded to Louis's side, following his gaze. Louis swung himself onto the Mastiff's back, locking his legs around the dog's barrel chest. Maximus gathered himself and leapt, his enhanced strength propelling them a dozen feet straight up. They landed on the side of a half-collapsed skyscraper. Maximus dug in his claws and surged upward, carrying Louis with him. They bounded from building to building, rapidly gaining height. Maximus let out a bark, and Louis knew what he meant. Not yet. They needed to get closer. The Mastiff put on a final burst of speed, his paws barely seeming to touch the crumbling buildings as he propelled them upward. At the apex of his leap, they hung suspended for a single heartbeat. Louis pulled the trigger, his shots drilling into the dropship's engines. The alien craft lurched, smoke and flame billowing from its rear. It listed to the side, trying to compensate. Maximus snarled and leapt one final time, his claws finding purchase on the stricken ship's hull. Louis clung to his back, still firing, aiming for any vulnerable point he could see. They hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Behind them, the dropship crashed into the ruins, exploding in a gout of plasma and shrapnel. Louis picked himself up, scanning the battlefield. The juggernauts lay dead, ichor pooling around their massive corpses. The other human-animal teams stood tall amidst the destruction, their enhanced companions barely winded. Maximus limped to Louis's side, favoring one paw. The serum had granted him immense strength and speed, but even he had his limits. Louis laid a hand on the Mastiff's broad head. "You did good, boy, real good." Maximus leaned into the touch, his tail giving a single exhausted wag. Together they turned to rejoin their squad, ready to hunt down any surviving Lemnorians. This battle was won, but the war for Earth had only just begun. The bunker doors burst open, the enhanced human-animal teams surging out into the war-torn streets. Lewis and Maximus led the charge, the Mastiff's paws pounding the cracked pavement, his eyes blazing with newfound power. A juggernaut reared up before them, its hideous maw gaping wide. Maximus leapt, a snarl ripping from his throat. He crashed into the beast, his jaws clamping down on its neck with crushing force. The juggernaut thrashed, its claws scrabbling at Maximus's flanks. But the serum coursed through the dog's veins, his bite pressure increased tenfold. His teeth sank deeper, ichor spurting. With a wrench of his powerful neck, Maximus tore the juggernaut's throat out. The beast toppled, its lifeblood gushing onto the rubble-strewn ground. Raj darted between the legs of another juggernaut, his speed and reflexes heightened to superhuman levels. His claws flashed, hamstringing the monster with surgical precision. It stumbled, off balance, and Raj leapt onto its back, his fangs finding the weak points in its armor. Above the melee, Zephyr streaked towards a squadron of Lemnorian fighters, her wings now razor-sharp. She sliced through their hulls like a hot knife through butter, the ships exploding in gouts of flame. The tide had turned once more. The enhanced animals and their human partners decimated the Lemnorian forces, tearing through their ranks like a force of nature unleashed. Louis rallied the human-animal teams, his voice rising above the din of battle. "Push forward, we end this now." They fought their way to the heart of the Lemnorian invasion force. There, a massive transport ship disgorged more troops and juggernauts, an unending tide of reinforcements. Louis looked to Maximus, a grim smile on his battle-scarred face. "What do you say, boy? One last charge." Together they led the assault. They blasted and tore their way into the transport ship's interior, the other teams close behind. Lemnorian soldiers and juggernauts fell before their onslaught, no match for the enhanced human-animal pairs. They battled to the ship's reactor core. Louis planted a series of explosive charges, while Maximus held off the remaining defenders, his jaws and claws red with alien blood. "That's the last of them," Louis shouted over the blaring alarms. "Let's move!" They raced back through the ship's corridors, the countdown ticking in Louis's head. They barely made it out before the charges detonated. The transport ship was ripped apart in a titanic explosion. The blast wave leveled buildings for blocks, the shockwave knocking Louis and Maximus off their feet. They picked themselves up, ears ringing, coated in dust and debris. The transport ship was a smoking ruin, the heart of the Lemnorian invasion force destroyed. As the blast wave dissipated, an eerie silence settled over the ruined city. Louis and Maximus picked their way through the rubble, the Mastiff limping slightly but still alert, his enhanced senses scanning for any sign of remaining Lemnorians. Around them, the other human-animal teams emerged from cover, their faces grim but determined. Ursa shook dust from her fur, a deep growl rumbling in her chest. Raj padded silently at Private Singh's side, his tail twitching, ready to pounce at the first sign of trouble. "Listen up," Louis barked, his voice carrying over the crackle of still-burning fires. That transport was their command center. With it gone, the Lemnorian forces will be in disarray. We press our advantage now while they're reeling. Sweep the city, sector by sector. Root out any alien stragglers, show no mercy. A chorus of acknowledgements came back over the comms, the soldiers' voices edged with savage satisfaction. They fanned out, their animal partners taking point, enhanced senses leading the way. For hours they hunted through the shattered streets. Lemnorian soldiers, scattered and demoralized, fell before the human-animal teams like wheat before a scythe. Maximus tore the throat out of an insectoid warrior, his jaws snapping through chitin like kindling. Ursa crushed a squad of Lemnorians under her massive paws, their plasma fire pinging harmlessly off her serum-enhanced hide. But as the sun began to set over the ruined skyline, an ominous hum filled the air. Louis looked up, his gut clenching. The Lemnorian ships were pulling back, rising into the clouds. "They're running," Sergeant Vasquez crowed over the comms. "We've got them on the ropes." His fears were confirmed a heartbeat later. The bellies of the Lemnorian ships yawned open, and a sickly green mist began to pour out, cascading down onto the city below. It spread with unnatural speed, engulfing streets and buildings, seeping into every crack and crevice. But it was too late. All around him the enhanced animals began to convulse, their bodies writhing in agony. Ursa let out a roar of pain, her mighty frame crumpling. Raj thrashed on the ground, foam flecking his muzzle. Maximus staggered, his legs giving out. He crumpled to the ground, his chest heaving as the alien toxin seared his lungs. Louis scrambled to his companion's side, cradling the mastiff's massive head in his lap. Maximus whined, his eyes rolling in pain, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "No, no, no," Louis muttered, his voice cracking. "Stay with me, boy, stay with me." But Maximus's struggles were weakening, his enhanced body fighting a losing battle against the Lemnorian poison. Louis's calm crackled. It was Dr. Patel, her voice tight with urgency. "Louis, I've been monitoring your suit readings. The toxin, it's affecting the animal's enhanced physiology in ways I didn't anticipate." "You have to do something, Doc," Louis pleaded. "They're dying out here." "I might be able to synthesize a counteragent," Patel said, her words spilling out in a rush. "But I need a pure sample of the toxin to work with." Louis looked out at the city, the streets now choked with swirling green fog. It would be like walking into the maw of hell itself. But one glance at Maximus, at the loyal companion who had been by his side through countless battles, and he knew there was no choice. "I'll get you a sample," he growled. "Just be ready." "No, boy," Louis whispered. "You're in no condition. I've got to do this alone." But the look in Maximus's eyes, even clouded with agony, brooked no argument. Where Louis went, he went, to the ends of the earth or the end of all things. He hefted Maximus to his feet, slinging the mastiff's massive form over his shoulders. With a grunt of effort he staggered upright, his armor's exoskeleton whining with the strain. Step by labored step, man and dog ventured out into the poisonous green haze, their bond the only light in the gathering dark. The city had become an alien landscape, the very air toxic and wrong. Louis's suit filtered the worst of it, but he could feel the malignant tingle even through his sealed armor. Each breath was a battle for Maximus, his enhanced lungs straining against the invasive toxin. But still he clung to consciousness, his loyalty and determination an unbreakable force. They staggered through the silent streets, the only sound the labored rasp of Maximus's breathing and the crunch of rubble under Louis's boots. The green fog swirled around them, as if alive, seeking to drag them down into oblivion. The fate of the entire world rested on the shoulders of this one man and his dog, a last desperate hope against the pitiless onslaught of a merciless foe. In the poisoned heart of an invaded city, they walked on, defiant to the last, a living testament to the unbreakable spirit of Earth and all her children, both two-legged and four. Louis staggered through the toxic green haze, Maximus draped across his shoulders. Each breath burned in his lungs, the filters in his suit straining to scrub the poisonous air. Maximus wheezed, his enhanced body fighting a losing battle against the alien chemicals. But they pushed on, driven by desperation and the unbreakable bond between man and dog. They had to get the toxin sample back to Dr. Patel. The lives of their comrades, both human and animal, depended on it. The ground crunched beneath Louis's boots, the shattered concrete coated in a sickly green film. Overhead, the twisted skeletons of skyscrapers loomed out of the haze, like the rib cage of some long-dead beast. At last they reached the site of the heaviest contamination. The gas here was so thick, it was almost opaque, a roiling wall of noxious green. Louis's suit readings spiked into the red, warning alarms blaring in his ears. He gently lowered Maximus to the ground, the dog's legs trembling with the effort of standing. Louis pulled out the sample container, a reinforced glass vial with a hermetic seal. He knelt down, holding his breath, and filled the vial with the toxic sludge that pooled on the ground. The substance hissed and bubbled, its mere proximity enough to fog the vial's glass. Louis sealed the container and stowed it safely in his suit's storage compartment. He reached for Maximus, preparing to hoist the dog back onto his shoulders. A hissing sound, like steam escaping a valve, made him spin around. Emerging from the green fog were a pack of Lemnorian soldiers, their insectoid bodies encased in sealed environment suits, their compound eyes glinting behind rectangular visors. They raised their plasma rifles, the weapons humming with deadly charge. Louis cursed, dragging Maximus behind the burned-out husk of a car. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, slagging the metal inches from his head. Louis unslung his pulse rifle, the weapon an awkward weight in his left hand, as his right cradled the precious toxin sample. He leaned out from cover and fired one-handed, the recoil jarring his aim. The pulse bolts splashed harmlessly off the Lemnorian's armored carapaces. Maximus struggled to rise, a growl rumbling in his chest. His muscles bunched under his fur as he prepared to lunge, but Louis held him back. "No, boy," Louis panted. "You're in no shape. I'll handle this." He popped up again, unleashing a barrage of suppressing fire. The Lemnorians scattered, buying Louis precious seconds. He scooped up Maximus and ran, zigzagging through the rubble. Plasma bolts chased them, searing the air, but Louis didn't look back. His lungs seared, his legs pumped, his entire being focused on reaching the bunker. A plasma bolt clipped his shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed to the ground, Maximus tumbling from his grasp. The toxin sample skittered across the concrete, coming to rest against a chunk of rubble. The Lemnorians closed in, their mandibles clicking in anticipation. Louis crawled towards the sample, his fingers straining. A clawed foot stomped down, pinning his hand. He looked up into the barrel of a plasma rifle, the weapon's heat searing his face. A black blur slammed into the Lemnorian. It was Maximus, his jaws clamping down on the alien's throat, ichor spraying. The Lemnorian thrashed, its claws raking deep gashes in Maximus's hide, but the dog held on with the tenacity of a bulldog. He reached Maximus's side as the last Lemnorian fell, its head a smoking ruin. The dog lay panting, his fur matted with blood, both red and green. "Good boy," Louis whispered, gathering Maximus into his arms. "Let's get you home." The entrance to the bunker appeared out of the haze, a reinforced blast door set into the rubble. Louis stumbled towards it, his vision tunneling, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The toxins were taking their toll. He collapsed against the door, fumbling for the entry keypad. The buttons swam before his eyes, blurred and indistinct. He shook his head, trying to clear it. A hiss of static in his ear, Dr. Patel's voice crackling over the comm. Louis, are you there?" "Doc," Louis slurred. "We got it, the sample, but Max—" A shape loomed out of the fog, a Lemnorian, its armor scorched and pitted, ichor leaking from a dozen wounds. It raised its rifle, aiming for Louis's head. A plasma bolt seared the air. Maximus yelped. The Lemnorian went limp, its face a ruin of shredded chitin. Maximus slumped on top of it, his breathing shallow. "Maximus!" Louis screamed. He dragged himself to the dog's side, cradling his head. Maximus's eyes were glassy, his tongue lolling. The bunker door cycled open. Dr. Patel stood there, her eyes wide behind her protective mask. She took in the scene, Louis kneeling over Maximus, the dead Lemnorian, the glowing toxin sample clutched in Louis's hand. "Get him inside," she snapped, "quickly before the gas." Louis heaved Maximus into his arms, staggering through the door. Dr. Patel sealed it behind them, the locks engaging with a hiss of pneumatics. Louis laid Maximus gently on an examination table. The dog's breathing was labored, his pulse weak. Dr. Patel snatched the toxin sample, rushing to her lab equipment. "Hold on, Max," Louis whispered, stroking the dog's blood-matted fur. "Just hold on, the doc will fix this, she has to." In the lab, Dr. Patel worked feverishly, the toxin sample glowing under her instruments. The fate of Earth's animal defenders, the key to humanity's victory, rested in her hands. Maximus whined softly, his tail giving a single feeble wag. Louis held him close, whispering encouragement, praying to any god that would listen. They had come so far, sacrificed so much. It couldn't end like this. It couldn't. In the bunker, Louis paced like a caged tiger as Dr. Patel worked feverishly at her lab station. The soft glow of holographic screens, illuminating her strained features. Maximus lay on the examination table, his breathing labored, fur matted with sweat. Louis clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened, the waiting, the uncertainty eating away at him. Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. Soldiers rushed past, ferrying weapons and supplies. The ground shook with distant explosions. On a tactical display, red dots swarmed the city's perimeter, the Lemnorian ships massing for a final assault. Louis's comm crackled. It was Sergeant Vasquez, her voice strained over the sound of pulse fire. "They're coming in force, Lieutenant. Ursa and I are holding the north barricades, but we can't last long without reinforcements." "Copy that," Louis replied, his jaw tight. "Sing, status on the west quadrant?" "Lemnorians are swarming our position," came Singh's clipped response, punctuated by Raj's roar. "We're laying traps and choke points, but it's just buying time. We need a miracle." Louis looked to Dr. Patel, desperation in his eyes. She met his gaze, shook her head. Not yet. He made a decision. He couldn't sit idle while his team, his city, fought for their lives. He strode to Maximus, laid a hand on the dog's heaving flank. Maximus whined, his tail thumping once against the table as if in understanding. Louis turned to Dr. Patel. Louis grabbed his pulse rifle and charged out of the bunker, into the chaos of the battle-torn city. He linked up with Hawkins and Zephyr, the eagle's wings still bearing the scars of her dogfight. "We've rigged demo charges at these key intersections," Hawkins said, pointing to a holographic map. "When the Lemnorians march in, we blow the charges, bring the buildings down on top of them, should funnel them right into our kill box." Louis nodded, scanning the tactical display. "Singh, Vasquez, pull your teams back to these rally points. We'll catch the bastards in a crossfire when they come through." Acknowledgements came through the comm, terse and determined. The soldiers took their positions, a tense silence falling over the ruined city. In the distance, the Lemnorian ships descended like a swarm of locusts, their hulls glinting in the smoky light. Louis raised his rifle, sighting down the rubble-strewn street. In his earpiece, Dr. Patel's voice crackled. "Louis, I think I've got it, the cure. But I need more time to synthesize enough doses for—" A series of deafening explosions ripped through the city. Buildings imploded, raining debris onto the advancing Lemnorian horde. Alien screams filled the air, but still they came, clambering over the rubble, plasma rifles blazing. Louis and the others opened fire, pulse bolts stitching through the Lemnorian ranks. Hawkins directed Zephyr into a diving attack, the eagle's talons raking across insectoid faces. Louis cursed, ducking as a plasma bolt sizzled over his head. They were out of time, out of options. Suddenly a familiar bark pierced the din of battle. Louis's head snapped around. There, bounding over the rubble, was Maximus. His fur gleamed with an eerie green luminescence, his eyes blazing with renewed vigor. Behind him came the other animals, Ursa, Raj, all of them, surging with unnatural vitality. Dr. Patel's voice crackled over the comm, triumphant. "I did it, Louis. I found the cure. Administered it to Maximus and the others. They're better than ever, stronger than ever." As if to punctuate her words, Maximus leapt, soaring over a shocked Lemnorian squad. He landed in their midst, a whirlwind of snapping jaws and slashing claws. Aliens screamed as they were torn apart, their weapons useless against the enhanced dog's fury. Ursa barreled into a juggernaut, the two titans grappling in a clash of claws and armor. Raj sprinted between the behemoth's legs, his fangs finding the weak points in its joints, ichor spraying. Overhead, Zephyr streaked past, her wings slicing through a Lemnorian dropship's engines. The craft spiraled out of control, crashing into the heart of the alien formations. Cheers erupted from the human soldiers. They surged forward, rallying behind their animal companions, pulsefire ripping into the faltering Lemnorian lines. Louis stood shoulder to shoulder with Maximus, blasting aliens left and right. His eyes met his loyal dog's, saw the fierce intelligence, the unbreakable bond. Together, man and beast charged into the fray, the battle turning into a rout. The Lemnorians fell back, their formations crumbling, their juggernauts toppling under the relentless onslaught. In the midst of the chaos, a lone figure strode forward. It was Murloc, his armor splattered with the blood of his own soldiers, his eyes blazing with madness and hate. He leveled his plasma rifle at Louis, a snarl twisting his mandibles. "Die, human filth!" Maximus raised his head, his muzzle stained with alien blood. He let out a howl of victory, the sound echoing across the shattered city. All around, the Lemnorians were in full retreat, clambering desperately into their remaining ships, fleeing back to the stars. The human soldiers and their animal companions pressed the advantage, pulse-fire and fang and claw harrying the aliens as they fled. Louis stood amid the carnage, Maximus limping to his side. The dog was battered, bleeding from a dozen wounds, but his tail wagged as he looked up at his human partner. Louis knelt, wrapping his arms around Maximus's neck, burying his face in the dog's fur. "We did it, boy," he whispered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "We won. Earth is safe." Maximus whined softly, his tongue licking at Louis's cheek. Around them the other human-animal teams gathered, battered but victorious. Singh supported a limping Raj. Vasquez cradled Ursa's massive head in her lap. Hawkins stroked Zephyr's ruffled feathers. They had fought as one, human and animal, an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of war, and together they had achieved the impossible. They had saved their world, their home. But as Louis looked out over the ruined city, the smoke-choked sky, he knew their fight was far from over. The Lemnorians would be back, seeking revenge, seeking to finish what they started. And Earth would be ready. Louis, Maximus, and all the others, they would stand watch, ever vigilant, ever ready to defend their planet, their people, their bond. No matter the cost, no matter the odds, they would never stop fighting, never stop protecting, never stop being Earth's sword and shield, man and beast, together until the end. In the heart of the maelstrom, Louis and Maximus fought as one, a perfect union of human tenacity and animal ferocity. They carved a path through the Lemnorian horde, pulse-fire and fang, rifle and claw, an unstoppable force. But then, looming out of the chaos came Murloc. The Lemnorian commander towered over the battlefield in his battle armor, a nightmare of advanced alien technology and raw, savage power. Maximus leapt at Murloc with a snarl, his enhanced muscles propelling him through the air like a cannonball. His jaws clamped down on the alien's arm, teeth crushing through armor and into the flesh beneath. Bones splintered under the force of the dog's bite. Murloc roared, a sound of pain and fury that shook the very earth. His other arm lashed out, a crackling energy blade extending from his gauntlet with a hiss. The blade slashed across Maximus's side, parting fur and flesh, leaving a scorched, bloody gash. Maximus yelped in pain, his grip loosening. Murloc shook him off, the dog hitting the ground with a thud and a whimper. Louis saw red. He charged at Murloc, firing his pulse rifle from the hip. Bolts of searing energy slammed into the alien's chestplate at point-blank range, the impacts echoing like thunder. But Murloc's armor held. He staggered back a step, then another, but did not fall. His energy blade swung, a scythe of sizzling light. It cleaved Louis's rifle in two, the weapon sparking and smoking in his hands. Louis dropped the ruined rifle and drew his combat knife in one fluid motion. Murloc's blade came whistling down, but Louis was faster. He ducked under the killing blow and lunged forward, driving his knife into a gap in Murloc's armor, right where the alien's heart would be. The blade sank to the hilt. Murloc convulsed, a strangled gasp escaping his mandibles. His blade winked out and he toppled backward, hitting the ground with a crash. But even as the life faded from Murloc's eyes, his claw twitched. On his gauntlet a small light began to blink. A dead man's switch. Across the city, the remaining juggernauts shuddered. They began to glow, their armored hides flickering with an eerie, pulsing light. Then they exploded. It was a chain reaction of utter devastation. The juggernauts detonated one by one, each blast more powerful than the last. Buildings toppled, streets crumbled, entire city blocks were reduced to rubble in an instant. At the epicenter, the human-animal teams were tossed like ragdolls by the shockwaves. Louis was flung through the air, his body slamming into a crumbling wall. Darkness claimed him. When he awoke, it was to a world of ash and ruin. The city was gone, reduced to a smoking wasteland. The sounds of battle had faded, replaced by an eerie, haunting silence. Louis dragged himself to his feet, every movement a symphony of pain. His armor was scorched and dented, his flesh bruised and burnt. But he was alive. He staggered through the rubble, searching desperately for signs of life. For Maximus, he found his loyal companion half buried under a slab of concrete, his fur matted with blood, his breathing shallow and labored. Louis fell to his knees beside Maximus, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. He cradled the dog's head in his lap, stroking his ears like he had done 1,000 times before. "You did good, boy," Louis whispered, his voice cracking. "Real good." Around them, other survivors began to emerge from the ruins. Dr. Patel crawled out of the wreckage of the bunker, her lab coat torn and stained. Sergeant Vasquez limped into view, supporting a badly wounded Ursa. Private Singh appeared, cradling a whimpering Raj in his arms. They were battered, bloodied and broken, but they were alive. Against all odds, against the full might of the Lemnorian Empire, they had survived. They had won. But the cost had been staggering. The city was a graveyard, a monument to the fallen. So many brave souls, human and animal alike, had given their lives in defense of Earth. Their sacrifices would never be forgotten. Their courage, their loyalty, their unbreakable bonds, these would endure, shining examples of the heights to which life could rise. Louis held Maximus close, tears flowing freely now. He didn't know if his faithful friend would survive, but he knew that their connection, the love between them, was eternal, unbreakable. He knew that whatever happened, whatever challenges the future held, they would face them as they always had. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.